Hey everyone, welcome to an EthStaker. I think we're calling these Tech Call Mondays. I don't even, is today Monday? What day is today?
Monday.
Oh, great. Yeah, see, so Tech Call Mondays, that works. So welcome, I'm Super Fizz. I'm here with Thorsten. How do you say your last name, Thorsten?
Behrens.
Behrens.
Yep.
I'll just say, well, so I know him as Yorick Down. Like that's how I've known him for a long time, and then he changes his name on me and I don't know what to call him anymore.
Right.
And Remy Roy.
Hi there.
And Buddha, who I just saw with some really weird icon. You're gonna show something on the camera again? Maybe not.
No, my camera is on the floor, that's why. But hi.
Hi.
Hello.
And our intern for 2022, Mr. Mojo. Hello, Mr.
Hello.
Hello. Hey, before we get too far into this, Buddha, is OX and Viz going to put the data up? I've been like checking all day.
Wait, is this supposed to be public now?
I mean, it's going to get public. Today's the day, right?
I haven't talked to him much about it, but I think it's going to get public. I tried to, I asked him if they want to use the beacon chain, like a subdomain to get more publicity, but they didn't have enough time to adapt the theme of the website to the beacon chain theme. But once that is done, we can host it through beacon chain, depending on if they want it, obviously.
As a segue, Buddha works with the person we know as OX and Viz, or Invisible Symbol, and Invisible Symbol and Michael Sproul are working together on some beacon chain client data that we're excited about. But that's not why we're here today. Sorry. We are here today to do something extremely exciting. We're going to talk about Eth-Docker, or as the repo is called, Eth-Docker. And that is a product developed by our own Yorick Down, or Thorsten Behrens. What is Eth-Docker?
Yeah, it's really exciting if you're an Uber geek, otherwise maybe not so much. So Eth-Docker is a way to run Ethereum clients and do that quickly and easily. How did it come about? In 2020, I think now, mid-2020, I became aware that Ethereum proof of stake was a thing. I became aware there was a Medasha testnet. I wanted to geek out because I was bored. So I looked at Somer Esat's guide. That guide was excellent. I got it all up and running in 2 hours. And then I decided 2 hours is way too long. I'm not doing that again. I want this in something that takes under 10 minutes. And that's Eth-Docker. So what it does is it takes all the little things you have to do, like I need this version of Go and I need a Java, etc. And as Docker does, it encapsulates all that. So it doesn't matter what's on your machine. It matters what's in what's known as a container, which you can think of as a very sophisticated zip file, which contains absolutely everything the program needs to run.
Okay, so that's, I agreed to ask the dumb questions. I think you jumped ahead to tell us what Docker is.
Right.
What is Docker? So I hear of Docker all the time, and I know that all of the cool people use it, but I don't know what is Docker?
So when you come to this without knowledge, right, the first thing you might think is, oh, Docker is too complicated for me, right? I'm not a programmer. But that's the same attitude people have towards the command line in general. Like, I can't program, I don't know how to use Nano until you explain Nano is a text editor, just on text, not on, there's no window as such, but it's a text editor. So all the same things apply. And so the first thing I would say is don't be afraid of Docker. It's actually probably easier to get this going than it is to follow something like a Soma guide. Although it will take you more effort to dig down because now it's up and running and you don't have any reason anymore to understand everything to the nth degree, right? So what is Docker? It is a tool that is designed to take a, what you might call a runtime environment, what I called earlier a sophisticated zip, right? Basically everything the program needs, grab it from something called Docker Hub or build it locally, and then run it. So if I have a program like I have, say, Lighthouse, I get that all pre-packaged, run that on my machine, and all I need is any kind of Linux really, and it is up and running. It does use the Linux underneath. This is not a virtual machine. But as far as Lighthouse is concerned, it lives in its own little world. It doesn't see the rest of the machine.
So a few background things about Docker. There is a learning curve to Docker. If you've never used it before, it will feel frustrating for the first couple of hours. But the benefit, kind of like Thorsten said, once you get the basics of Docker, it really opens up a lot of new possibilities that you didn't know existed before, which really means taking things like Eth-Docker and spinning up a validator node in minutes with a few commands rather than a lot of instructions.
And to make this easier, Eth-Docker comes with a shell wrapper, something called fd. It's a little script that does all that for you. So while you can get smart about what is a Docker in the first place, you don't, strictly speaking, have to.
One of the things when I first learned Docker that was frustrating to me is not really knowing what was going on in the background. Like when I start a program, I like to see terminal output. And Docker kind of abstracts all of that away. Are you going to show us ways that we can actually look inside that Docker container and know what's happening?
Yes, I will. And this is very similar to running things in systemd like you do with Soma's stuff, right? When you run it as a service in systemd, like you follow a Soma ISAT guide, I'm going to shill that guy relentlessly because I like his guides. You don't see the output either until you type journal.ctl, right? And then you get the logs. This is similar here, just instead of journal.ctl, you type fd logs, or if you want to be closer to the metal, you would type docker compose logs, right? So it's very similar in that way in how you interact with it. You can also interact with it if you just want to see it run. There's a run command, so you can just see it run and output to the screen right away. Of course, in that moment, the moment you stop the run, it's stopped again, right? The same way as if you did a Lighthouse on the CLI directly instead of running it as a service in systemd. And because we like things to be up for months without worrying about them, of course, we have them as a service, right? So you can think of this as very similar to the systemd stuff, just more automated. I would maintain easier to update, easier to not worry about what my build environment looks like. Like, oh, you Lighthouse didn't run? Yeah, you needed the new version of Rust. The what and the what now, right? So I don't have to worry about that anymore. That's all containerized for me, packaged, abstracted away, packaged in my zip on steroids. That's a container.
One of the ways I want to help people conceptualize what Docker is you probably run a lot of your systems now as system services, and people may be familiar with setting up system services. That's how Samaire's and CoinCashew's guide, they show you how to set up system services. When you're running under Docker, you're no longer using system services. Docker has its own upstart. And so when you're choosing how to set up your node, you're really going to choose either a system service or Docker. You're not going to use both. While they don't do all of the same things, when it comes to running a node, you can essentially think of it as an either or, because in that case, they provide the same service.
Correct. Okay, so I have a little bit of a documentation site. I'd start sharing, and maybe we would just look at a picture first, and then we can go into, okay, how do you spin it actually up, and have questions along the way. How's that sound?
Love it.
All right. I'm going to start sharing the entire screen. I will no doubt you just see hide floating meeting controls. Like that sounds good. That can go. Okay, so we can see this okay. So this is at ethdocker.net, which has all kinds of documentation. It starts with this overview here, right? So there's your Linux server, the same thing that you would always use, whatever that is. That can be a physical machine in your home, right? That's what it should be, or it could be a VPS in the cloud. Then inside this is a Docker Compose stack, and we'll show you how to do that. and that runs a consensus client, like a Lighthouse or a Nimbus or whatever, and an execution client like a Geth or an Aragon or a Besu or a Nethermind, a validator client. In Eth-Docker, that is typically the same team as the consensus client. I haven't gone crazy here. While you can theoretically mix and match these, we don't. A reporting package, which is optional, like a Grafana Prometheus. And then, of course, you need keys. In production, these keys would be generated outside in an air-gapped machine. And then you would deposit against them on Launchpad and then bring them in to your validator client by bringing them over to your Linux machine and importing them. So this should all feel pretty familiar. This is the same components that you have whenever you run an Ethereum node, right? That's not what I wanted. This talks a little bit about what you need to do in order to get Eth-Docker up and running. We need the prerequisites. We need clients and choose and do some initial Linux security, and then generate the deposit files, import the validator key store files, and run the client. There's some hardware stuff. Do you want to go over that? It's really not Eth-Docker specific. That's more.
I think, yeah, general hardware requirements for staking. I think people already.
They know that. We'll get over that. Okay. Okay, first things, we need Docker. Now on Ubuntu, there's a thing that trips people up. When they install Ubuntu, they might actually come with a version of Docker in something called Snap. And that causes no end of trouble. So give me just 1 second. We'll look for it and make sure it's not here. I think I am on a netcup right now. Testing, no, that's the root, Ubuntu. Okay, great. No snaps are installed. That's exactly what I want to see. Or at the very least, I don't want to see Docker. Then we'll just go through this here, update all packages.
If Snap showed up with Docker, what would you do?
Sudo snap remove purge Docker. This is rather brutal. It gets rid of everything. So if you actually had,
it's right there.
If you actually had things already running in Snap Docker, they would now be gone, including their data. So you may want to be careful about that and come to the EthStaker Discord to talk about what is going on. But if you've never used Docker, this is safe to do because it's just on your system, nothing's running in it, you're fine, right?
This kind of gets to the idea that we really only recommend running one thing on this box, and that one thing should be your validator. If you have a bunch of other Docker images, while you're aware that you can secure that, we really don't recommend it.
Yeah, that's up to everybody themselves, you know. Then we're going to install now that this has just updated my system, I'm going to install Docker Compose. And this will also bring in Docker. In this particular case, it was already installed, but that's what this would do. And then I would make sure it's actually enabled with this line here, sudo system control enable. Okay, that's it. I now have Docker installed. My prerequisites are done. Under client setup, usually Linux stuff, right? I want a non-root user. If your user here says anything but root, you're good to go. I might want my user as part of the Docker user group. This just means I don't have to type sudo all the time. So I'm going to do that and say user mod Ubuntu and then new group Docker. Okay, there we go. So now if I do like a Docker PS, it will come back. I actually do have things running here because that's my testing machine, and I can see these things.
People are going to feel like, it's okay. I don't mind hitting sudo now and again. But what you end up discovering is that when you use sudo in that context, you end up changing permissions occasionally, and then you end up in a rabbit hole. So it really is better just to add your user to that group,
right? And then the rest here still is, you know, regular stuff that helps you with staking, whether you do this with Eth-Docker or otherwise. You want a static IP address so you can actually forward some ports. And now we get to the meat of it. We're going to clone this project. So Eth-Docker lives on GitHub, and we're just going to paste this and say, go clone this for me. it was successful when I end up in this Eth-Docker directory here. Okay, and now we're going to use the quick start shell. So there is a whole manual setup here, which I will not go into because why suffer? There's a little program called ethd. If I run it without anything, it just tells me what I can do. And if I run it with ./ethd-config, it will say, okay, let's go and configure this and get going. So let's say we want to be on Prata testnet. Now we get to choose our deployment type. The first one would be a normal Ethereum node. And then there's some other options like Validator client only for integrating with Rocket Pool, or a Blocks SSV node, or an Ethereum RPC node, which just is for API calls. So for staking, it'll just be an Ethereum node, right? Consensus, execution, Validator client, all three. Okay.
How fancy that it doesn't say ETH2 anywhere. It just says Ethereum.
Oh, it hasn't said ETH2 for a year. I was
fancy. That's all.
I was just, I don't know. It's one of those things, you know. There's no ETH2. There's no ETH but ETH, and Vitalik is its profit. So we need to cut that out, right?
No, it's perfect.
Just a little joke. Okay, consensus client. Do we have preferences here? All 5 are supported.
Can we do Lodestar?
Sure, Lodestar. Here we go. We want a graffiti. Let's say that is EthStaker, of course. That's our graffiti. Okay.
What is a graffiti? Is that like your name, or what is that?
What is a graffiti? A graffiti is a very good question. Is a little string that your client publishes every time you get a block proposal, and it's just for fun. It's visible on the chain. You can use that to totally dox yourself, or
like
to be silly.
Essentially, you're saying whenever you are proposing on the Beacon chain, it'll say whatever you put as your graffiti.
That's
like
right.
That's your identifier. Okay, that's cool.
So I want to say something hilarious here. Our friend Boodle actually proposed to his fiance in a block proposal. So he used a proposal to propose. Which
I love it. And what did it say?
It basically, Danny, will you marry me? Something like that. So pretty funny.
That is really nerdy.
That's so sweet.
Yes,
yeah,
that's
really sweet. That's a great idea.
Uh-oh. It's like, Hey, why not Besu?
Besu, okay. Besu, the Java client for our execution
so
client. Here we go.
have to ask, my assumption is that the interoperabilities between all of these are worked out. Like there's no...
The interoperability between all of these is worked out 100%. Wow. They all work with each other. This is why we can do this one from column A, one from column B thing, right? There are a couple things you want to keep in mind. I'm going to just switch over here for a second and go to client resource usage. Not all clients use the same amount of RAM. So Besu, for example, in my testing was about 8 to 9 gig. Nethermind was 13. Geth fluctuates depending on how much cash you give it. So Aragon is a gig. So you may want to make sure it at least fits into the amount of RAM you have together with the consensus client you're going to run, right? So if you say do a Teku at 9 gig and a Besu at 9 gig, you're going to be hard pressed in 16. Maybe you want 24 before you try that, you know?
I'd like to thank you. You taught me that the more cash you give Geth, the smaller the database. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, the smaller the database growth. You still have to prune the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so we're going to go back here. What we were looking at, client setup. Oh yeah, we're still in this go through the quick start shell, right? Do I want to use a fallback execution client? I'm actually going to say no here because that's not going to be a thing come merge anyway. So I'm going to just pretend that we are with the new hotness and we don't have that. Do I want the Lodestar rapid sync? Why, yes, I do. So this would sync Lodestar in minutes. I'm going to say yes. For that, I need to be over here in Fura.
Look how ready you were. I love that.
Right. This is a Docker demo project I created and will delete after this. So don't get too excited that you see again an endpoint. with my project secret. Oh my God. So I created an Eth2 project. They still use that in Infura, and say I want the Prata endpoint. I want it at HTTPS. I'm going to just copy that. I'm going to go over here and right click to paste, and then tab over and hit enter for OK. Grafana dashboards. Sure, why not? Those are fun. Maybe they'll even work out of the box. We'll see. And now it goes and it builds all this. So you see it grabbing all this stuff from the Docker Hub and building all that locally.
So beautiful. For people who don't know, this is a minimum of an hour doing it by hand.
It sure is. So at this point, we do not have any keys imported. I'm actually going to go a little crazy if you guys are okay, and I'm going to create a key while maybe you want to explain to people why this is a seriously bad idea in production to create the keys in here.
Yeah, so we want to do the absolute opposite of creating keys on YouTube. So creating keys is literally the most valuable step, or the most important step in creating your validator. You're going to use a tool, either the deposit tool or a graphical tool like Wagyu, to create a 25-word seed phrase and a validator key. And the most important thing is that you do not lose your 24-word seed phrase, no matter what you do. Don't lose it, and don't share it. That key, more than anything, controls all of your funds. And so there's a strong recommendation to do an offline key generation. And honestly, I don't know how many people actually generate offline, but you do really want to do it on what you would consider a clean machine, and then clean up your tracks afterward. Don't leave a trace of your seed phrase on the machine. The keys that are generated are maybe less important because the worst that can happen with them is they can be used to slash you.
Right.
But all of this data is sensitive and something you should keep very private.
Yeah. So we can, while this is building here, we can talk a little bit about what we saw recently. So somebody came into the EthStaker Reddit and said, oh, my keys got compromised, or rather my mnemonic did. So what they did was they had put the mnemonic into an unencrypted text file on their NAS, their network attached storage in their home, right? And they were like, well, my NAS is double password protected. It's secure. Then, just for the giggles, they installed an Ethereum miner on their main Windows machine and ran it there for about a week. That particular Ethereum miner was not friendly. It trawled their file system, including the NAS, to look for a mnemonic, and found it. That is scary.
And then, yeah, so we actually have two separate occurrences of this. And what we're really looking for is for someone to verify this in like a home lab environment, so that we can talk about it more publicly. Because what we don't want to do is sort of publicly slander the suspect
Right.
before we have good information that what we believe has happened has happened.
Indeed.
But yeah, the reality is,
what I'm saying is risky, right? I'm not blaming the person who did this. It's normal to put things into text files. I'm just saying it's risky.
Yeah.
Right? So what I'm doing here is, because we're doing a demo and it's testnet, I'm actually going to show key generation, and I am going to also show the mnemonic, and I will throw all this away after, right?
What was the build that just took 2 minutes? Was that Grafana building?
No, that was the deposit CLI.
Oh, okay.
This thing we're running right now, that's what took 2 minutes. This is the deposit CLI, which you would run as a downloaded executable probably from the EthStaker deposit CLI GitHub on an air-gapped machine, right? Okay, so we're gonna say we speak English and our mnemonic language is English. Great, and we want one new validator. I'm gonna do a password for it. And now it's gonna, this is precisely what you're not supposed to do, show your mnemonic on YouTube. Or just copy paste it.
I was doing a Kintsugi test and I showed my mnemonic to set up my Kintsugi validator, and someone in this room used my keys and slashed me for the fun of it. So
yes. Someone who we don't know, right?
Someone, yeah, we'll never find out who it was, Ruby Roy.
Right.
Which is great. That's a fun way to play and test. So I that was all in good fun.
So this now says your keys can be found at app validator keys. That's actually, this is a Docker thing, right? I'll stick there for just a second. This is not on your host. This is app validator keys inside the container. It has its own view of the file system, which is not your file system. There's another advantage of containerization in Docker is that these things live in their own little world. Whatever you have on your Linux file system, they don't actually have access to unless you explicitly give them access. So what I've done here is after it's done, I'm copying this to this directory. So let's just take a quick look. Well, I'm gonna go eth validator keys and see what we have here. And there it is. We got our deposit data file, which we would put into Launchpad, and our key store M. So now
I want to be clear, an intermediate user would go to cd/app/validator keys and find out that that doesn't exist. And that's kind of what Thorsten was
correct.
talking
That's
about.
what I'm talking about. This existed only in the container, and now that the container is done running, it's gone. It's no longer there, right? This never existed on your host system either. This only existed inside the container view of a little overlay file system it has.
I
so
can't
that's
tell you
why
how long it took me to really understand that.
Yeah, it's
like,
in its own little bubble where only it can see things, and it can't see your home directory. That's actually good, right? We want that. So the generated files have been copied to here. I'm going to just do a quick fd and see how to import this, because I'm not sure I remember. Key import, easy. Let's do that. .fd key import. So this is new, so I hope this works. Enter the key store, the key store password. Let's do that. And validating password.
Password
is correct.
You don't have to move those keys around to a new spot or something. Like, they're generated right where they're needed. I love that.
Right.
Well, you
so
move them programmatically.
You would have to move them in if you did this the right way, and you created them, and you created them air gapped. Yes.
And that's where we run into that sneaky problem of, even though we promote air gapped key generation, we don't actually always do that. We have a slightly lower standard of security in reality.
That's absolutely true. Yes, I will still promote it, right?
Yes.
This import was actually done by Lodestar. Eth-Docker just put a wrapper around it. I should maybe explain that as well. What's the philosophy here? So Eth-Docker's philosophy is that it always relies on the client code as much as the client team's code as much as possible. It does not publish Docker images itself deliberately. Anything it wants to wrap around it, it builds on your machine first. And it does small changes like an easier key import, or it makes sure never to run anything as root. Lighthouse, for example, by default will run as root. I don't like that. So it runs as a non-root user if you use Eth-Docker, right? Okay, now we have...
Yorick, one thing.
Was that to say... Go ahead, Buddha.
Let's assume you created the keys on a different machine. Like, where do you put those keys in? Like
that's an excellent question, right? So let's say you have them on a different machine, and you created them and you put them on a USB drive, and you put the USB drive in here, and then maybe you just copy them over into your home directory. What you can do is, see what it says here, fd key import -- path. So I could do fd key import path, home directory, my super secret keys, if that were actually the directory where they are, right? It would then find all .json files in my super secret keys and try and import them.
Okay, thank you.
Just like that.
We said something interesting, or you said something interesting about not relying on local sources, but preferring the actual client source. I saw a question on Reddit recently, like, if you stopped developing this, I don't want to be stuck with an old client. And the benefit here is what happens if you stop developing it?
Right. Okay. Very good question. This is one of the reasons why I designed it like this, right? So there are other projects out there that publish their own images. I want to be sure I'm not in the middle of all of this. So for example, I'm going to Denver, and then I'm going to go skiing at the end of Denver this month. And while I'm on the slopes, I don't want to have to think about whether there is a new client release. As long as the client didn't change its parameters, you can just do this fd update, and it will go grab anything that's new. Nothing now, of course, because we just built this, right? Actually, Prometheus for some bizarre reason. It will grab anything that is new and build it, and that's it. And you can run it. Now, if I really stop developing this, and clearly this didn't build completely earlier, interesting. If I really stop developing this and the clients change how they run, meaning they have I'll show this in a second here, they have a parameter on their command line that's no longer the way it used to be, right? Then you would have to make those changes, or somebody needs to take it over. So let's take a look, which you can do locally. So I'm using here something called Lodestar Base. So let's look at Lodestar Base.
And before we get too far, I wanted to promote the concept that you're not in control of
I am
updates.
not in control of updates, but the only thing I'm in control is how this is run, right? So for example, say I have here my consensus client, and this is the entry point and all the things it needs, and up to here, network, right? And now let's say it's merge time, and I've fallen off the face of the earth, and this needs a new -- merge in here. You would just add a new line with -- merge and then run it. So it's all relatively readable, right? The new client version will always be there. If it needs a different way of running, then that's a configuration file change. So at this point, let's say fd up, and it will start everything. And now you asked, well, that's great. How do I know it's running? Right, let's look at logs. So we have, typically we have 3 containers here we really care about: consensus, execution, and validator. And the rest, this is all Grafana Prometheus stuff, right? So let's take a look at consensus. So this would be the Lodestar consensus client. Okay, I see here it fetched its weak subject activity state from, and here you can see the secret again, etc. Prater. So it is getting ready here. It is initializing. That looks good. That's its rapid sync. Let's take a look at the execution client. And that is currently syncing as we see. Received 1 confirmation for pivot block headers. So that is starting.
I always like to go to, and I don't know how much it will dock to you, to go back to Infura and check the requests at the
Docker demo here. Yeah, sure. Let's take a look what we got there. And we can see a couple requests coming in here.
Because I know the first time that I tried checkpoint sync, I used the wrong endpoint. I was just learning it.
One request came in,
yes.
which is all we need.
It connected, right? That's all
yeah, it did. So here now you can see we're getting a whole bunch of errors that Lodestar throws. This is a Lodestar-ism. This is actually relatively normal for it when it has started a checkpoint sync. This is, I should talk about that for a second as well. This is not
Before
under
you go
control.
On,
go ahead.
You did a Control-C, and a lot of people will think Control-C exited the runtime, but the Control-C only exited the log.
Right, because that's what I'm running here. exits what I'm running, and what I'm running is logs, right? So I'm very narrowly just getting the logs. That's a very good point. I can Control C this at any time. To actually stop the thing, I'd have to fd down or to use Docker. I can also go directly into Docker, do a Docker PS, and oh my God, I see all this stuff running, right? So what I was going to say is when you see the client itself doing things in the logs that you don't quite understand, that's a question for the client team. Eth-Docker is really a very lightweight wrapper around the whole thing. It does not change the client code at all. And then the last thing maybe I look at is the validator. I don't think the consensus client is fully up yet. So let's see what we see here. Node is syncing. That's what we expect. And maybe if we go a little bit further, decrypted 1 validator key stores. So I can see it got the key. That's great. And now it's waiting for the consensus client to be done syncing, right? The last thing I'm going to show is, I'm also going to say this is a terrible idea because right now I think I have this completely unencrypted. I'm going to show Grafana. I do have a video that explains how to actually secure that with SSH tunnels, etc., yada, yada, if it's not in your own home. But for this, we're just going to do Grafana on port 3000 and see what happens. Maybe nothing.
We'll say, yeah,
Absolutely
the one complexity
nothing.
that Docker adds is port management is a little more dubious, at least in my experience.
It can be. It might also be I have a firewall in place. Not entirely sure how I left this here. We're gonna give it a minute, but if we can't figure it out, we can't figure it out. I don't want to.
I like how you're doing status numbered. I just do down. I'm just kidding. The easy way.
Oh, okay, I got it. Yeah. Funny. I was actually gonna take a look and see. We can turn it off, if that's what it is. But I'm actually not forbidding. No, I am forbidding 3000. See, I'm doing this the proper way. Okay, that's great. Let's show it the proper way then. Let's show it the proper way, gentlemen. So what I've done here is actually, at some point, I must have used this for a demo, and 3000 is the Grafana port, and allowed it from localhost, but disallowed it from anywhere else, which is how it's supposed to be. So what we're going to do here now, right quick, we're going to reconnect to this, but this time we're going to use SSH to say port 3000 on my PC should go to 0.0.1 should go to 127.0.0.1, which is localhost port 3000 on the remote side. So it will take all traffic to port 3000, shove it into an encrypted SSH tunnel, push it through there, and then pop it back out at the other end, going to
I want to point out,
this location.
You're doing fancy tricks that other people will not need to do. You won't need to tunnel your
No, you don't have to do that. But that's a good best security practice. And independent of Eth-Docker, I should say that as well. This is a good best security practice for unencrypted things like Grafana, if these unencrypted things are on the internet somewhere.
I always worry. Yeah, so on your local network, there's no concern for this. I worry
on your
about
local network, you don't have to do this. And you probably wouldn't have these UFW things in place. And so just going there would have worked. Yeah. Right.
I worry about people who can barely grasp the concept of running validator clients, and then we're throwing.
No, I get it. And if you wanna cut that out, by all means, right? So now we're gonna go in as admin, and it wants a new password. Okay, here we are. Now Grafana and Eth-Docker comes preloaded with some dashboards that the community gave us. I am not very good at which dashboards are awesome. So if there are ones that you like better than others, please share them. For example, we don't seem to have a Lodestar dashboard at all. So if somebody has a great Lodestar dashboard, please share it and we'll add it to this project. So I can go here to Besu, for example, and I will see the official Besu dashboard. That I think was it. Do we have further questions? This is really the bulk of it. At this point, I could now take my deposit. file and deposit for this on the Launchpad, and that'll be up and running. And then whenever, I'm here and I'm like, okay, it's been 2 weeks. How do I update that? cd Eth-Docker, eth update, and
hopefully quick this time.
And this should go quick this time. And then eth restart. Update just pulls the new things. It does not actually restart anything. That's deliberate. And then if you want to restart it, eth restart.
Can you show, you may have mentioned this before, but where the deposit data is?
Sure. So the deposit data would be on your air-gapped machine, totally, right? Yep.
Of course, yes.
Yes.
I don't want to do wink to anybody. I do acknowledge that air gapping is best practice. I just also acknowledge that people are real and whatever.
Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
Great, found it.
Yep, there it is. So deposit data.json. Everything in there is public. There's nothing scary in deposit data. It can't be used to /u. It can only be used to deposit on behalf of this validator.
What happens if I need to restart my machine? Like, does it all restart by itself, or like how does it work?
It does indeed. Yes. Everything will restart when you restart the machine, unless you stopped it. So if I do an eth stop here, it will not come up, right? The reason for this is that we have a restart variable somewhere in here, unless restart equals unless stopped. This can also be set to restart always, then it would always restart, even if it has been stopped. That can be interesting. Some people are like, maybe I stopped it, and then at least when I reboot the machine, it comes back, right? But the default is unless stopped, meaning it will always get restarted unless you as the user deliberately stop the thing.
What I like to do, especially when it comes to something like a validator or a validator on a testnet, is after I stop it, I like to reboot the machine and then do a Docker PS to see if it came up, because you don't want those sneaky processes running in the background and you've forgotten about them, because a Docker image can run in the background for months and years and you may not even be aware of it.
Correct. So I think I heard reboot this machine and then talk some more and see what happens.
Mr. Mojo, what are you taking away from this?
Sure. So basically what I'm taking away is that thankfully someone has put in a lot of work for me. So when I decide I want to set up anything in this space, oh man, thankfully I don't have to spend 3 hours combing through everything. I need this, I need that. Nope. It's all here. I don't have to worry about it. And it seems here on the right side of the screen share, how you already have the setup. It seems like anybody can go in as long as they know they have to go to the eth-docker.net and look at the setup guide. They can go through and do it.
Yep.
Hey, easy peasy,
could
right?
You do this? Could you do this?
I probably could do this. I probably could.
Yeah, so I had somebody who was
all by myself, and I've never set up a validator yet. So I bet you I could go through and do it.
Yeah, so we had somebody recently who said they came to this they had never set up a validator, they'd never used Docker. It took them 2 hours. So my theory of 2 hours is too long was maybe a little, shall we say, optimistic, right? It took them 2 hours probably because they went through all the security setup in Linux, setting up key stores for SSH, etc., and that which I recommend in my guides, and which was new to them. So they needed to do all that. And then it just takes time to wrap your head around it, right? As you can see, once you're familiar with it, because of this eth-config, it can actually be done in 10 minutes. But the first time, yeah, probably set 2 hours aside just to get familiar. If you haven't, created a user on Linux before, if you haven't dealt with SSH before, and so on.
Yeah, because I know for
Docker
me,
desktop users, of course, don't need SSH. That's another thing. So there's one less. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're fine. I know for myself, I would be a new Linux user as well. I've used Windows my whole life, even though Superfizz tried to turn me on to Linux a while ago.
But
I was
you
just
were in 6th grade.
I know. I know. That's why I say it was a while ago, but I'm definitely far older than 12 now. So
Wow,
Unfortunately,
Right,
for
so
I
me,
guess.
as the years go
here's the
by.
moment of truth. Superfizz, you wanted to know that this is gone, right? So I expect to still see the things that were running previously, 2 containers that were not in Eth-Docker. And there they are. I have a Sepolia. Eth-Docker test is actually one, is George, who's trying Teku. And then this over here is a Geth that's running on Sepolia. Those 2 were there before, but the Eth-Docker stuff itself is gone. It is not running at this point. If I want to run it again, just go in here and say eth up. And I can see that it is bringing all that back up. And now my Docker PS is a lot busier.
So I'm confused. I thought it would restart.
It does not, because we stopped it.
Oh,
we
I
did
see,
an
yeah.
fd stop, and then we rebooted, right?
I see.
So now we can do this again with, now that it's running, reboot, and maybe talk some more, and see that it is back up if I'm not manually stopping it. So Superfizz's point was, if I recall correctly, Superfizz, if I stop this because I meant to stop it, I don't want it to come back up when I'm rebooting. That's scary, right? Is that right? Was
Yes,
that what you were?
Yes,
That was your point, right? And now we're doing the opposite. We're saying, if I have it running and I have an automated reboot power outage, or just an automated reboot because I'm doing unattended upgrades and I don't want to worry about Linux upgrades, and I let it do that, right? All that stuff. I do not want to worry in that case about it not coming back up. So we'll see that here. Basically, the way Eth-Docker behaves out of the box is it goes with your choice. If you have it running, it keeps running after reboot. If you stopped it, it stays stopped after reboot.
Awesome. I love the whole product. Like I've spent a lot of time like just focusing on bare metal installs because I want to be close to the clients. But
Sure.
when it comes to just getting it up as quickly as possible, this is extremely handy. So if my box goes down tonight and I need to rebuild in the morning, I'm going to go to Eth-Docker because it's going to get me online as quickly as I can, rather than building from scratch.
Yeah, there's a point to building from scratch, right? And there are components in Eth-Docker that go. This will take a minute to reboot. I'm being too impatient. There are components in Eth-Docker that go deeper than what we've shown here, and that we will probably not get into. Such as it can actually build the clients from source if that is so desired. That's by design. So it's good for testing. If you need to build a client from source, you have something you want to try in their current development branch. Eth-Docker supports that. There's a little file called source. There's 2 variables. One is source target, and I think the other one is Dockerfile. So instead of Dockerfile binary, it would be Dockerfile source, and then set the source target and do a Docker compose build, and it will compile from source, right? Fully supported in this thing. It can also be used to run RPC nodes. I'm actually doing that for my own business. I'm using this thing to run API RPC nodes that do not validate.
Yorick, if you were to switch to clients, how to do it? Is it like if the switch client, or is it more work than that?
It is a little bit more work than that. Yes. It's a good question. Let me get here to support switch clients. Okay. So the reason it's a little bit more work is I was afraid that if I make a mistake in the code somewhere when I'm switching clients, I'm going to get you slashed. If your keys exist in 2 locations at once, right, you're going to get slashed. And so I was like, yes, I know what I'm doing and I can run all kinds of tests, and it would be the height of arrogance to say I cannot introduce a bug into key handling. So the idea of moving keys around programmatically scared me. Therefore, I have deliberately not created something to make that automated. So what you would need to do here, the method I am advocating here, is to create a new client stack and let it sync. The reason I did it that way was because we didn't have rapid sync at the time. So maybe I want to rewrite this. So at the time, there really wasn't a rapid sync, right? Which means it took a few days for something to synchronize, and I didn't want you to be down. So this all talks about doing a new client stack. Maybe I want to rewrite that. So if I'm thinking about how I would do that now, probably what I would do is I would say, okay, let's do an let's just do a Docker PS. I'm not going to show a client switch. We're going to switch away from Lodestar and do it safely. So everything, as you can see, is up. I'm going to stop this. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, really the only thing I care about that I need to remove is the validator data here and the consensus data. So Docker volume remove, everything is in a volume. So in this case, the ls validator data holds my key. This is now gone. The key is now gone, and I have no way of running this twice. And then I'm going to get rid of the beacon chain database as well while I'm at it. And then maybe I'll do a new eth-config. If I do that, I want to be careful that I choose Besu again as my execution client, because I don't want to resync that. And if I don't remember that, let's do just take a look at my environment file. I'm running Besu, right? Okay, let's do a new eth-config. So we were on Lodestar. We're going to switch to Lighthouse. We're still on Prata testnet. It's going to be an Ethereum node. We're going to say Lighthouse. This is still going to be EthStaker as my graffiti. And this is important. Select the same execution client I had before, because I am not going to replace it. And then we're going to get our Infura sync again going here. So we have a rapid sync, and we don't have to worry about being down for too long. Dashboard. Docker demo. Project settings, and we're on Prata, that one. And dashboards, okay. It will now grab this Lighthouse stuff. I now have to do one more thing before I do anything. I'm still at risk here of getting myself slashed if I'm moving too fast, because as you can imagine, I can do this here within minutes. And if I start attesting twice in the same epoch, I'd get myself slashed, right? So what I need to do here is I would have to go into Prata.beacon chain and look for my validator here, which of course I'm not going to find because I didn't actually deposit for it. Let's just grab a random validator, shall we? Can we do that on beacon chain? Is that a thing?
Yeah. If you type any indexed in the search bar, you can like go towards any validator.
Yeah, let's take validator 5. It is actually, it's perfect. This is a very good, this is great. This is actually a great example. So in this case, just imagine that it wasn't down for, days, but what you do want to see is that it missed a couple attestations here, right? And that your last attestation, say this one actually came in, we're pretending, right? That was maybe 2 epochs away. So it is now finalized. It's in a finalized epoch. I'm safe, and I'm missing them. So I know the key isn't running anywhere. And now I can import it safely, right? So that's what we're pretending. Another eth key import. And I still have the keys where they were. And now it is imported into Lighthouse, and I just do another eth up. So thank you for asking that question, because it reminds me that I really need to redo that part of the documentation now that we have rapid sync, checkpoint sync, and all these clients. Now when I look at the consensus clients, which is now Lighthouse, I see it loaded the checkpoint block and state, and it is now syncing, and I am using Lighthouse version 2.1.2, right? That's it.
It's wildly efficient.
Yeah. It's so efficient, you got to be a little careful. I mean it with the whole, make sure you're missing attestations, make sure you deleted the Lodestar thing.
And some people will say 6 minutes, but it really 13 minutes is
13 minutes is fine. You know, just walk the dog around the block or something.
and so I've had that, and I'm sweating the whole 13. Well, when you get used to it, it doesn't bother you anymore. But when you start doing it and you're missing 13 minutes, it kills you. But you really do get used to it. Like, you get used to just being down for a minute, and it's okay.
Yeah, it's a couple cents. It's not a big deal, right? Compared to a slashing. And okay, that was it. Really, really fast client switch without following these directions, but using RapidSync instead.
Well, and your directions will be updated eventually anyway, right?
They will be. Oh, yeah.
Presumptively, yeah.
We'll update that.
So that's awesome. I love Eth-Docker. I acknowledge that I haven't used it a lot before now because, like I said, I wanted to know the clients personally, or the software personally. But this is so handy for just easy operation.
Yeah,
especially for updates. Updates are intimidating to new people, and here it is literally update and restart, and you're done.
That's it. If the update, if the restart, you're done, right? One thing that can trip people up, this is slightly advanced, but say I went in here and I said, I've had this with a couple of users, not a lot of people do this. They go into, say, the Lighthouse definition file, right, in here, and they say, I really want doppelganger protection. So they go in here and they say, I'm adding doppelganger protection, like that. And I think that's all it is for Lighthouse. I might misremember the exact name of it, but something like that, right? Now, when they do an FD update, what will happen is, and I'll scroll, already up to date, unfortunately. It will scroll past rather fast if it really happens. But what happens here is, because this is a project on GitHub, you see here it says I have a modified file. It will refuse to bring in new updates until this has been committed. So in this case, what I need to do is say git add, git commit, use doppelganger,
even notes,
X, yes, and that's it. Now
that will work.
Now I am ahead of main by a commit, my local commit. Now if I do an FD update, I'll just bring things in and keep my changes.
I say most people would never even get to that level.
Most people never need that. No, I've had like 2 users.
I love to focus on like the simplest operation. And if this can be very simple operation with extra bells and whistles if you want to use them.
Yes, so. I know. I keep going into the extra bells and whistles. It can be as simple as just FD config and then FD up, FD update, FD restart. That's all you need, right? FD key import. That's it. Those are the commands you need. That's it.
So Yorick, I'm glad you developed this. I'm glad to have you on EthStaker. This is check it out. The people here today are all the new EthStakers.
Yeah.
So hey, welcome everyone. So thanks again for sharing.
So there will be a test, right? Is there a POAP for people who do this successfully?
If you can figure out how to distribute a POAP for doing this successfully, then hell yes. If there was some way to ping or to collect a credential for people who ping the repository, then I'd be all about it.
Yeah.
What's an EthStaker called without a POAP, right?
Right.
Like,
yeah.
How can we doing it?
Did it even happen? If there was no POAP, there's no proof anybody attended this. I'm just saying.
We tell people we're working on a Kintsugi POAP. We should probably keep that a secret. When is this going up?
Isn't Kintsugi shutting down in like a week?
Yeah.
In a few days, yeah.
So, well, and that's now I have to like get that snapshot done before this publishes, because then people will be like, "Oh, get off Kitsugi." But yeah. Anyway.
All right. Thank you.
All right, thanks for your time.